You don't even have a single nail in this place. You are nothing but the hired help here. Now you're fired.
Get out.
My husband screamed after the judge made his ruling, leaving me without a roof over my head or a single cent to my name. I sank onto a bench and just started to sob. Welcome to Betty Stories. I share new life stories here every day, and I'd really appreciate it if you hit subscribe and like my video. Now, let's jump back into my story. I'm sure you'll love it if you keep listening till the end. Next to me, an old man in ragged clothes was shivering from the 0 degrees cold. I felt bad for him and gave him my last scarf. He suddenly straightened up and said, "I don't forget kindness, daughter. Come with me, and I'll show you your new home." My husband, driving past, nearly slammed into a lamp post when he saw.
To
Understand how my life completely crashed and then started again, we have to go back 5 minutes to the county courthouse parking lot. The icy wind hit my face, but I barely felt it. Marcus Thorne stood by the open trunk of his enormous black SUV. His face, usually smooth and well-groomed, was now twisted with rage. He pulled out my gym bag, the only thing they allowed me to take, and hurled it straight into the dirty snow. "Take your rags," he bellowed so loud that people on the other side of the street turned around. "And don't you dare show your face near my property again." The security detail has their instructions. If they see you within 300 feet, they'll set the dogs on you.
I
Stood there silently. There was nothing left to say. Just half an hour ago, the judge had read the decision in a monotonous voice. The prenuptial agreement I'd signed 15 years ago, without looking because I loved him, had turned out to be a life sentence. I received nothing. No share of the catering business we built together. Baking cakes in our first tiny apartment kitchen.
no kondo.
No car. The SUV door opened slightly. Tiffany Rivers peered out. She was wearing a blinding
White.
mink coat that cost more than everything in my pathetic gym bag combined.
She
Didn't step out into the cold. She just lowered the window, adjusted her perfectly styled blonde hair, and let out a loud, mocking laugh. "Come on, Marcus. Let's go," she whined dramatically. "It smells like desperation out here. We'll be late for the restaurant." Marcus fidiously brushed his hands off as if he'd touched something contagious, got behind the wheel, and floored the gas. The truck roared away, blasting me with a cloud of accurate exhaust fumes and icy slush from under the tires. I was left alone in the middle of a huge empty parking lot.
my
Feet carried me on their own toward the nearest bus stop, even though I knew I didn't have money for a ticket. The only thing in my coat pocket was some loose change that wasn't even enough for a loaf of bread. I sat down on the freezing wooden bench, pulled my knees to my chest, and covered my face with my hands. Hot, bitter tears streamed down my cheeks, instantly cooling in the 0-degree air. 38 years old, a master baker, the wife of a respected man in this town. And here I was, tossed out like an old cake box. Someone coughed heavily nearby. I looked up. An old man was sitting at the other end of the
bench.
He looked 70, maybe older. His clothes were like a patchwork quilt of dirt and holes. His old greasy overcoat was unbuttoned, revealing a thin, washed-out sweater underneath, clearly not suited for this weather. He was shaking so violently that the bench vibrated under us. His hands, blue from the cold, tried to pull the collar tighter, but his fingers wouldn't obey. He wasn't asking for money. He wasn't even looking at me. He was just trying not to freeze to death. I looked at my bag in the snow, then at my own hands and warm leather gloves. I felt terrible, but this man was mortally cold. At least I had the health and strength to stand up. He seemed to have nothing left. I slowly unwrapped my scarf. It was the only expensive thing Marcus hadn't managed to take. A wide, warm pashmina made of real alpaca wool, a gift from my mother. It had warmed me for the last 3 winters. I scooted closer to the old
man.
Take it, I said quietly, draping the scarf over his shoulders. The old man flinched as if struck and raised his eyes to me. They were surprisingly clear, light gray, and not old at all. Wrap it tighter, I instructed, and my hands automatically began to bundle it around his neck, just like I had done hundreds of times for Marcus when he left for a construction site in the freezing cold. There you go. I took my thermos out of my bag. There was still about a pint of hot herbal tea left, which I'd brewed that morning before.
Court. Drink this.
It's thyme and mint. It'll warm you up. The old man accepted. The thermos lid cup with trembling hands. Steam hit his face. He took a sip, then another, greedily but carefully. With every swallow, the violent shaking in his body subsided. The wool scarf kept the warmth in securely. He finished the tea and carefully screwed the thermos lid back on. Then he slowly straightened his back. That's when something strange happened. A second ago, I was looking at a helpless, miserable vagrant.
But now,
with his shoulders squared under my expensive scarf, he suddenly looked different. There was a hard edge to his posture. He looked at me not like a beggar, but like a man used to giving orders. A lot of people walked right past me today in this town. His voice was but firm. Some turned away. Some threw pennies to buy off their conscience. You're the first one who gave away their own warmth. He stood up. His movements were confident now. I don't forget kindness, daughter, and I always pay my debts. Get up. Where are we going? I asked, confused, wiping away dried tears. Home, he simply replied. Come on, I'll show you your new house. It sounded like the rambling of a lunatic, but there was such authority in his tone that I obeyed. I picked up my bag and followed him. We walked only about 200 yards, turned the corner, and came out onto Liberty Avenue. Directly across from the pompous 3-story mansion Marcus had built with my money stood another house. Townspeople called it the Heritage Mansion. It was a massive stone structure behind a tall row iron fence. Its windows had been boarded up for at least 10 years. The gates were tangled with chains. People said the owner had died overseas, and the heirs were fighting it out in court. The house stood there like a dark, ominous stain among the gleaming new construction. The old man walked confidently up to the massive gates. At that moment I heard the roar of an engine behind us. I recognized that sound. Marcus's black SUV was slowly cruising down the street. He must have decided to circle back to enjoy my humiliation one more time to see me trudging through the snow to the train station. The SUV drew even with us and slowed. The window rolled down. Marcus leaned out, a vile smirk playing on his face. Well, look at that. Simone found herself a bow who's more her speed, he yelled. Tiffany cackled.
Next to him.
What a perfect pair. Queen of the dumpster and her king. The old man didn't even turn his head. He walked up to the rusted intercom panel, which was hidden beneath the snow on the brick fence post. He took off his glove, not my scarf, but some tattered rag he'd been wearing, and quickly typed a long combination of numbers. Beep, beep, beep. A long tone. The green light flashed on. The gate mechanism, which looked completely rusted through, let out a quiet, satisfied hum. The heavy doors shuttered and began to slowly, smoothly swing inward. The smile slid off Marcus's face. I saw his eyes widen. He was so fixated on the abandoned mansion's gates opening that he forgot to brake. The SUV lurched forward one. Will hit the curb, and the vehicle slammed its bumper into a lamp post with a dull thud.
Go on in, the old man
said, making a welcoming gesture, with his hand toward the cleared walkway leading to the front entrance. Don't be afraid. I stepped onto the property, feeling the stunned gaze of my ex-husband on my back. The gates began to close behind us, cutting us off from the street. We stood in the middle of the huge courtyard. Up close, the house looked even more magnificent, though it clearly needed work. The old man turned
to me.
Now that we were alone, He removed the filthy beanie from his head. His gray hair was neatly trimmed. "My name is Elias Vance," he said. "And I am not a squatter, as you might have thought." He pulled a huge set of keys from a deep pocket. "I own this estate, and the land it sits on." He nodded toward the fence beyond which Marcus' pretentious three-story mansion with the faux gold lion statues at the entrance was visible. "Your ex-husband thinks he's the master of the universe." Elias smirked, and the expression was terrifying, but he forgot one detail. When he took out the loan to build his palace, he mortgaged the land and the house itself. He stopped paying the bank 6 months ago, hoping his connections at City Hall would cover for him. Elias inserted a key into the massive oak front door's lock. The lock clicked easily, as if it had been freshly oiled. "He doesn't know that a private investor bought his overdue debt 1 month ago. That investor is me. Your husband is living in my house, Simone, and now I decide how much time he has left there." I stepped over the threshold, and the heavy oak door slammed shut behind us, cutting off the street noise and Marcus' hysterical yelling. Inside, it smelled of old paper, cold stone, and time itself. Elias flipped a switch. High up on the ceiling, a huge crystal chandelier sputtered on with a dry, crackling sound. Light danced off the layer of dust covering the white, shrouded furniture. The place resembled a sleeping kingdom frozen years ago. Elias walked to the center of the grand hall. His footsteps echoed on the marble floor. He was no longer stooped. Within the walls of his own house, he seemed like a giant. "There are 30 rooms here," he said, gesturing around the space. "No one has set foot in here for 10 years. I've been living in the gardener's cottage while I watched your husband build his empire on lies. But now the time has come." He turned to me and looked at me sternly like a boss. "I don't need hired help, Simone. I can hire help for pennies and they'll steal sugar. I need a manager, a woman who will bring this house back to life. Your job is to get everything in order. The kitchen is your kingdom. Groceries are in the pantry. The freezers work. I check the generator every week." He paused and added in a quieter voice, "And I need to be fed the way you fed that old man on the bench with soul. Do you agree?" I looked at my hands. Just 1 hour ago, I thought my life was over. Now I was being offered the keys to a palace. "I agree," I said firmly. "Then get to work. Your room is on the 2nd floor, first door on the right. There's hot water. Clean yourself up and I'll deal with the documents in the study for now." I didn't waste a second. First, I went upstairs. The hot shower washed away not just the cold from the parking lot, but the sticky feeling of humiliation, too. I found a clean towel and a simple but sturdy robe in the closet. Dressed, I headed down to the kitchen. It was a dream, not a kitchen. Huge professional ranges, copper pots and pans, marble countertops. Dust was everywhere, but beneath it lay magnificence. I found flour, eggs, yeast, and butter in the huge industrial refrigerator humming in the corner. My hands automatically recalled their familiar movements. Kneading the dough was calming. I kneaded furiously, putting all my anger at Marcus, at Tiffany, at the injustice, into every punch I gave the dough. 2 hours later, an incredible smell of fresh baking, savory pies, meat, sweet rolls wafted through the huge empty house. The house was starting to wake up, and across the street in the mansion with the golden lions, panic was setting in. I saw it through the kitchen window. Marcus was pacing frantically in his yard with his phone to his ear. He had recognized Elias. Of course he recognized him. 15 years ago, Marcus, then a young and arrogant contractor, convinced the old owner of a brick factory to sign over the rights, promising him lifelong care, and then declared the factory bankrupt, funneled the money out, and threw the old man onto the street, spreading rumors that he'd become an alcoholic and died in a ditch. The resurrection of the dead man threatened Marcus with more than just a ruined reputation. It was total collapse. Marcus was waving his arms, pointing toward our gates. 10 minutes later, blue flashing lights illuminated the street.
2 police.
Cruisers pulled up to the gate. "Break it down," Marcus shrieked, jumping around the officers. "There are criminals in there. It's a homeless guy and my crazy ex-wife. They're dangerous." I wiped my hands on my apron, smoothed my hair, and looked at Elias.
He was
Sitting in an armchair in the corner of the kitchen drinking tea with the first batch of hot savory pies. "Go," he nodded calmly, handing me a folder with an official seal. "This is your first test, manager." I walked out onto the porch, the frosty air mixed with the scent of my pies. A crowd had already gathered at the gate. Neighbors, the same ones who had smiled sweetly at me yesterday and avoided my eyes today, were now glued to their windows and fences, hungry for a show. The police captain, a heavy man with a red face, was already gripping his baton and banging it on the metal of the gate. "Open up. Police," he roared. "Come out immediately with your hands up." Marcus stood next to him, grinning triumphantly. "I told you, knock the lock off. She'll tear everything up in
there."
I calmly walked up to the control panel and pressed a button. The gates slowly slid open. The captain raised his arm, ready for a fight, but
froze. I
stood before them, not in tears, not in rags, and not on my knees. I stood tall, head held high, holding a silver tray covered with a linen napkin. "Good evening, Captain Miller," I said loudly. Enough for all the neighbors to hear. "Why all the noise? You'll frighten the dough. It might not rise." Marcus choked on his breath. You set this up. Arrest her. She's trespassing." "Captain," I interrupted Marcus, not even looking at him, and handed the officer the folder. "Please take a look. This is the deed and a general power of attorney in my name from the owner, Mr. Elias Vance. I am the official manager of this estate." The captain took the papers, bewildered. He read for a long time, frowning, shining his flashlight on the seals, then looked at Marcus, then at me. "The documents are in order, Mr. Thorne," he mumbled. "The owner is Elias Vance. The notary seal is today's
date.
There's no unlawful entry. This is a fake." Marcus shrieked. Red blotches broke out on his face. "Vance died 100 years ago. She set this whole thing up. Mr. Thorne, watch your language." The captain snapped. I stepped forward and whisked the napkin off the tray. The aroma of fresh baked savory pies with meat and onions hit the noses of the officers who had been on duty all evening. "Officers, it's cold out here."
I
smiled. "The owner invites you in for some tea and a snack. They're fresh out of the oven." Then I finally looked at Marcus with an icy stare. "As for outsiders, entry is forbidden."
The
officers exchanged glances. The smell was irresistibly tempting. The captain swallowed hard. "Well, if the documents are in order and there's a check, a check must be conducted to interview the residents," he drawled, reaching for a pie. Marcus stood there opening and closing his mouth like a fish thrown onto the ice. He was humiliated, publicly in front of the entire neighborhood. He'd been made a fool, and the police he'd called in like his attack dogs were now eating out of the hand of his ex-wife. "You'll regret this," he hissed in my face as the captain walked past him into the yard. "I'll destroy you. You don't have a dime. You're nobody." A glacial calm washed over me. I remembered everything. I remembered him hiding his phone, locking himself in his study, lying to me about the company's low profits while buying Tiffany diamonds. I leaned toward the captain, who was savoring a pie, and said loud enough, "Actually, Captain, my ex-husband is right. You need to be vigilant. He's so concerned about the law." "Why is he nervous, though?" the captain asked with his mouth full. "Ask him about the safe," I said clearly.
The
one behind the hunters in the woods painting in his home office, coded to his mistress's birthday. That's where he keeps his construction company's black ledger, cash on which not a single cent of tax has been paid. About $5 million. If I'm not mistaken. Marcus's face went whiter than the snow at his feet.
The
Captain stopped chewing. He slowly turned to Marcus. The friendliness was gone from his eyes. A predatory interest had sparked there. Tax evasion on a massive scale. This wasn't a domestic
dispute anymore.
This was a promotion. Mr. Marcus Thorne, the captain said, smoothly, wiping his hands with a napkin. How about we take a little ride to your place? We'll check that tip.
I
Smiled, turned, and walked into the warm house, leaving Marcus alone with the law. He had so carelessly summoned. The next morning, all of Marcus' accounts were frozen. The IRS worked with terrifying speed, as if they'd been waiting for this tip-off. I saw a courier from the bank hand him the notification right at his front gate. Marcus crumpled the paper and threw it into the snow. His face was scarlet with fury, but a worse blow than the IRS awaited him inside.
Tiffany.
Her piercing voice traveled even across the street, cutting through the double-pane windows. You promised me a mink coat. You promised the Malda this week.
Why?
Is my credit card declined at the
Salon?
I look like a scarecrow. Marcus tried to calm her, but his arguments about temporary difficulties were drowned out by her hysteria. He desperately needed to save face. If the town learned that Marcus Thorne was bankrupt, his competitors would eat him alive.
By
noon, rumors were flying around town. To silence them, Marcus played a desperate
hand.
He announced a spectacular engagement party, a feast for the whole world. On Saturday evening, he sent invitations to all the town's elite, the mayor, the district attorney, the big business owners. It was a bluff, a frantic attempt to show he was still in
control.
Elias, sitting in his armchair by the fireplace, listened attentively to my account of these developments.
He
put down his newspaper and narrowed his eyes shrewdly. So he's having a party, an engagement to that girl. Excellent. We'll host a reception, too. I was
surprised.
But the house isn't even fully renovated. The furniture is still covered. Take the covers off, Simone.
He cut in.
This Saturday, we are announcing a charity winter ball. Admission is a donation to the local children's charity. And the most important thing, you will be cooking. Let the town remember whose food was the best in the region. I accepted the challenge.
A
competitive spark I hadn't felt in years ignited within me. I grabbed the phone and started calling my old suppliers, the very people I had worked with for 10 years until Marcus decided I should just stay home. Simone Hollis. Arturo, the owner of the best butcher shop at the market, shouted into the phone. Anything for you. Marcus owes me money for 3 months, but I trust you. I'll bring the freshest VE on a handshake. Everyone replied the same
way.
Uncle Jimmy the dairyman, Sam the fish supplier, even the owner of the wine boutique. They remembered me. They remembered who had really run the business. While Marcus pined at banquets for 3 days, I didn't leave the kitchen. I slept only 4 hours a night. The huge ovens worked at full capacity. I baked flaky salmon pockets, slow roasted geese with apples, and whipped the lightest cream for eclairs. The house filled with dizzying aromas, vanilla, cinnamon, roasting meat, fresh bread. The smell was so thick. It seeped through the walls and carried by the wind flew across the street right to Marcus Mansion. Saturday arrived. The evening was cold and clear. A line of luxury cars formed at Marcus's gates. Ladies in evening gowns, shivering in the cold, rushed inside. Marcus met them on the porch, beaming a fake smile. Tiffany hung on his arm, flashing a ring with a huge stone, undoubtedly bought on credit or taken out on a short-term loan. It was quiet at our place. Elias didn't care for fanfare. We simply opened the gates and turned on the lights in all the windows. The mansion glowed like a Christmas decoration. An hour passed. I stood by the living room window, watching the house across the street. Something was wrong. Guests were milling in the hall, but no one was entering the dining room. I saw Marcus nervously gesturing while talking to someone in A.
Chefesse uniforme.
Suddenly, the back door of Marcus' mansion burst open.
People in.
White hats streamed out. They carried empty trays and boxes. They loaded their van. The catering's leaving, Elias observed, walking up to the window. Looks like Marcus's card didn't work there either. He didn't pay the deposit, and no one's fool enough to work on credit. Disaster was brewing in the house across the street. Guests, used to luxury, stood with glasses of cheap champagne, but there were no appetizers. Hunger is a terrible force, especially when you're accustomed to having the best of everything. Then the wind changed direction.
I
Opened the window slightly. A powerful aroma of my fresh hot mushroom and chicken savory pies blasted toward the street. I saw Marcus's guests begin to sniff the air. One by one they walked out onto the porch to get some fresh air. What is that I smell? I heard. Good Lord, that's real gourmet pot pie. And all we have here are crackers.
The
Mayor of the city broke first. He was a well-known gourmand. He simply walked off Marcus's porch, crossed the street, and approached our open gates. Mr. Vance, he called out, seeing the owner on the threshold. They say you're back, and that smell is unbearable in the best way possible. Please, Peter. Elias invited him in with a wide gesture. We're hosting a charity evening, and dinner has just been served. That was the dam breaking. Seeing the mayor enter our house, the other guests, forgetting all decorum, and about Marcus followed suit. Within 20 minutes, Marcus's mansion was empty. Only he, an angry Tiffany, and a mountain of dirty glasses and cups remained. Meanwhile, a celebration reigned in our house.
people.
Ate as if they hadn't been fed in a week. They praised the goose. They moaned with pleasure, trying my cakes.
I
Was back in my element. I wasn't just pouring tea. I was the hostess of the evening. People approached me, shook my hand, and spoke kind words. They seemed to have woken up from Marcus' hypnosis. Among the guests was the city's chief architect, Mr. Arthur Davies, an elderly, intellectual man.
He was
Happily finishing a slice of cherry pie when I approached him to refill his tea. He was standing by the panoramic window that looked right onto Marcus's fence. Behind the fence, brightly lit by spotlights, stood the huge new 3-car garage Marcus had built last month.
He
Was very proud of this high-tech addition. Mr. Davies was frowning as he looked at the garage. Simone, he asked, quietly, without taking his eyes off the window. Tell me, did Mr. Vance keep the original land documents, the old, maybe even pre-war blueprints? Of course, I replied. There's a complete archive in the study. What's wrong? The architect shook his head, and I saw anger in his
eyes.
not bureaucratic anger, but the genuine human outrage of a history lover. I thought so, he muttered.
When
Marcus filed the project, he claimed that area was just empty land. But I remember my grandfather built this estate. He turned to me and spoke loudly, so much so that conversations in the hall died down. Simone, Mr. Vance, do you know what your neighbor's vulgar garage is built on? Under that concrete. The architect's voice trembled with indignation. Are the ruins of the Merchants' Winter Garden? It is a historical landmark from the 18th century. It's on the registry of protected objects. Building there was strictly forbidden. Silence hung in the hall. Destroying a historical monument in our city, which prided itself on its past, was more than just a violation. It was sacrilege. Furthermore, the architect continued, taking off his glasses and wiping them with a cloth. Based on the boundary survey I can see from here, Marcus' fence is moved 12 feet onto your property. He didn't just build his garage on a historical monument. He built it on your land. The crowd gasped. People who had congratulated Marcus on his engagement just an hour ago now looked at his house with disgust. This is no longer an Administrative violation, the mayor said sternly, setting down his plate. This is a criminal case and demolition. Immediate demolition at the owner's expense. I looked out the window. Marcus was standing by his garage, lonely and small, kicking his car tire, unaware that right now, amid the waltz music and clinking glasses, his sentence had just been signed by the city's most influential people. The paperwork arrived the next morning, even before dawn. The courier from city. Hall didn't bother ringing the doorbell. He simply taped the demolition notice right onto the faux gold lion at Marcus.
Gotta.
I saw it from the kitchen window while I was setting the sponge dough for bread. A bright red stamp. Unlawful. Construction. Burned on the gray paper like a brand. 5 minutes later, hell broke loose in the house across the street. Marcus ran out onto the porch in just his robe. He tore the paper off, crumpled it, and began stomping on it, shouting curses. But shouting can't demolish concrete. He needed a miracle. Or a dirty trick, and he chose the dirty trick. Half an hour later, I saw his front gate crack open, and Brenda Thorne, my former mother-in-law, slipped out. She skewered across the road, clutching a down shawl, constantly looking back as if afraid Marcus was watching her through a rifle scope. She looked pitiful, usually arrogant, always with impeccable posture. She now seemed like a hunched over old woman. She hesitantly pressed the doorbell button. Simone, sweetheart. It's me. Please, for heaven's sake, let me in. We need to talk. Don't leave an old woman out in the cold. Elias was drinking coffee at the table. He raised an eyebrow questioningly. She's a Trojan horse, Simone. You know that. I know, I replied, wiping my hands on a towel.
But
she's still my former husband's mother and the grandmother of my unborn children. I can't leave her in the freezing cold. I opened the gate. Brenda stumbled into the entryway, gasping and clutching her chest. She smelled of mothballs and expensive, heavy perfume. A strange, nauseating mixture.
oh, Simone.
Oh, dear girl, she wailed, trying to hug me, but I gently pushed her away. How did you manage here? A palace. A real palace. And at our place. It's hell. That girl, Tiffany, she's a monster. She doesn't cook. The house is filthy. All she does is demand money and shriek. Marcus is beside himself.
He's
Lost weight. He looks terrible. She collapsed onto a kitchen chair and theatrically dabbed her eyes with a tissue. I miss you so much, Valia. You're chilly. The cozy atmosphere. Marcus is a fool. What a fool he is. He regrets it, Valia. He told me yesterday. Mom, what a woman I lost. I listened to her and felt a flicker of pity stir inside. We had lived under the same roof for 15 years. I knew she loved gossip and money, but I didn't think she was capable of outright malice. Maybe she really was in distress.
I'll
Put the kettle on, Mrs. Thorne, I said, softening. I have fresh cherry danishes. Yes, yes, tea, she nodded.
quickly.
Her eyes darted around the kitchen and hallway. And where is? The owner? Mr. Vance is in the garden checking the greenhouses.
Elite.
Elias was actually in his study on the second floor. I turned to the stove to fill the kettle. The noise of the water drowned out the sounds in the room, but I, like any professional chef, had an ear tuned to the slightest change. I didn't hear the clinking of dishes or the scraping of a chair. I heard the quiet, characteristic click of a phone camera shutter.
Click.
I slowly turned off the
Faucet.
On the table in the hallway right near the kitchen entrance lay a folder. The same folder with the historical maps and boundary survey the architect had brought yesterday. Proof that Marcus's garage stood on our land. I quietly stepped back and peered into the hallway. My pity vanished instantly. Brenda Thorne was standing over the folder. With one hand, she was quickly flipping through the brittle pages, and with the other, she was holding her smartphone, snapping pictures of every sheet. Her face was focused and predatory.
No tears, no heartbreak, puree.
Calculation. Marcus hadn't sent her to reconcile. He had sent her to steal evidence, so he could later claim in court that the maps were lost or forged. I could have yelled. I could have thrown her out the door, but I remembered Elias's words. Anger is fuel. Don't burn it up. Uselessly. Use it for the engine. I returned to the kitchen, loudly, banging the kettle onto the stove. Brenda flinched, shoved the phone into her cardigan pocket, and skewered back to the
Chair.
When I came in with the tray, she was sitting with her hands folded in her lap, once again, posing as a saintly martyr. Here's the tea, I said calmly, setting the cups on the table. Help yourself.
Thank you, dear.
She reached for a Danish. You're so kind, unlike some
People.
Mrs. Thorne, I interrupted her, sitting down across from her. How is your pension? You receive an increased amount as the widow of a veteran worker. Is it enough? She choked on the crumb.
What?
My pension? Well, it's enough. Of course, Marcus helps out when he can, although he's having difficulties right
Now.
I pulled another thin black folder from the kitchen drawer. Elias had put this file together in 2 days. His lawyers and accountants were adept at finding what was hidden deep down. Marcus helps. I repeated, opening the folder. That's strange. The documents say otherwise. I spread a bank statement in front of her. Look here. This is your pension account, Mrs. Thorne. Access was limited to you and Marcus through a power of attorney you signed 3 years ago. Remember? So it would be easier for your son to pay the utilities.
My
Mother-in-law stared at the numbers. Her eyes widened. See these transactions?
I
Traced the lines with my finger. Every 15th of the month, the day the pension was deposited, the money was transferred to another account, cleared out to zero. That's a mistake, she whispered, paling. Marcus said he was putting it into a Heintrich CD to save up for a beach cottage for me. There is no CD, I said harshly, and there won't be a cottage. Look at the second page.
I
Flip the sheet over. This is the account for Prestige Motors. Payments for a red sports convertible, make, model, and the owner's name, Tiffany Rivers. The silence in the kitchen became deafening. Brenda snatched the paper. Her hands were shaking so much that the document fluttered. She read, and with every line her face aged 10 years. He took my money for medicine for my old age. Her voice broke into a high-pitched squeal. And he paid for that tramp's car. 3 years. I finished. You lived on a shoestring, cutting corners on everything, thinking you were building up capital. And your son was buying his mistress leather seats and custom rims with your money. She looked up at me. There was no more pretense in her eyes. There was a dark, bottomless hatred. Not for me, but for the son she had idolized and who had betrayed her for his mistress's whim. She slowly stood up. The phone she'd used to photograph the maps fell out of her pocket onto the floor, but she didn't even glance at it. I gave birth to him, she hissed, and the sound was more frightening than any scream. I stayed up all night for him.
I gave
him everything, and he throws me out for that. She reached into her enormous handbag. I tensed, not knowing what to expect, but she just pulled out a small pill bottle. Then she fished out a set of keys on a plain metal ring. He sent me to steal your maps, she said faintly, tossing the keys onto the table. In front of me, he said, Mom, save me or we'll lose everything. And all this time he was stealing me blind. She pushed the keys toward me with a trembling finger. That's the spare set. For the back door, the garage, his office, and the safes in the basement, the ones even the IRS doesn't know about. Why are you giving these to me? I asked quietly, looking at the glittering metal. Brenda straightened up. A cold fire burned in her eyes. Because in that house, she nodded toward Marcus's mansion. There is no justice left. But you, Simone, you were always honest. Punish him.
Punish him, so he
Remembers. Punish him for me. She turned and walked to the exit, not even buttoning her coat, leaving her phone on the floor of my kitchen. I remained sitting at the table. In front of me lay the keys to the enemy's lair. Now I could not just defend myself.
Now.
I could go inside. I gripped the cold bundle of keys in my fist so tightly that the metal cut into my skin. Brenda. Thorne had left behind a trail of heavy perfume and a bitter aftertaste of betrayal. But I had no time to dwell on
it.
Today was the day that would either cement my success or destroy the reputation Elias and I had been building. For the last few weeks, the mayor of the city had ordered a banquet for 50 people in honor of his wife's birthday. This wasn't just an order. It was a sign of trust. The centerpiece of the table was to be my signature tiered winter cherry
cake.
I put the keys in the back of the drawer and rushed back to work. Across the street, behind the velvet curtains of the master bedroom, Tiffany was watching our yard. She saw my assistants loading boxes of appetizers into the
fun.
She knew Marcus was out of money. The accounts were frozen, the credit cards blocked.
Her only chance to stay
afloat was to destroy me, to make Marcus seem like the only decent person left in town.
Her plan was as primitive as she
was, but no less dangerous. While I was seeing my mother-in-law out and talking to her in the kitchen, the back door of my van parked near the gate for loading was unlocked for barely 5 minutes.
That
was enough. Tiffany, pulling a nondescript gray jacket over her mink coat, slipped over to the vehicle. Inside the cargo area, open bags of premium Italian flour, which I had prepared for the sponge cakes, were waiting. She didn't steal anything.
She
simply emptied a canister of coarse cooking salt into each bag and stirred the top layer with her hand. I returned to work, suspecting nothing. Lena, bring the flour. I ordered my assistant.
We
need to set the batter immediately. We're already behind schedule. Lena, a quick girl with a blonde braid, lugged the heavy bag in. I turned on the stand mixer. Eggs, sugar, vanilla. Everything flew into the bowl. Then the flour went in. A white cloud rose into the air. The batter began to thicken, acquiring a beautiful creamy hue. Normally, bakers don't taste raw batter at every stage. But my grandmother taught me, Simone, your tongue is your main tool. Your eyes
can deceive you.
Your nose can fail you, but the taste never will. I dipped my pinky into the bowl and licked a drop of batter. I recoiled instantly. My mouth was immediately filled with a burning, unbearable saltiness. It wasn't batter. It was a salt concentrate. If I had baked those cakes and served them to the mayor, it would have been the end. A scandal, food poisoning, disgrace. Throughout the entire region. Stop, I yelled so loudly that Lena dropped her
spatula.
Stop the machines. Everything goes in the trash. Miss Hollis, what happened? She asked, startled. Sabotage, I hissed, spitting the salty taste into
the sink.
The flour is poisoned. Check the other bags. We checked everything. There was salt everywhere. 100 pounds of excellent flour were ruined. The banquet was only 6 hours away. We don't have any more flour of that fine a grind, Lena whispered, close to tears. What do we do? Cancel the order?
No cancelations?
My eyes narrowed. Run to the pantry.
Get
the regular all-purpose stuff. We'll sift it 3 times. We'll add more baking powder. We'll do this. But now I know this is war. We made it. The cake turned out magnificent, though it cost me a mile of nervous energy. When the van with the order finally pulled away from the gates, I wiped the sweat from my brow and looked out the window. Marcus and Tiffany were leaving the house. They were getting into the car. Marcus looked beaten down. He was shouting something, waving his hands. Tiffany sat with a stone-cold face. Apparently they were heading to the bank or to a lawyer trying to unfreeze the accounts. I realized there would be no other chance. I didn't change my clothes. Right in my work tunic, I took the set of keys Brenda Thorne had given me out of the
Drawer.
Mr. Vance, I'll be gone for half an hour, I said, passing his study.
Be
Careful, came the reply. He didn't even ask where I was going. He knew.
I
Crossed the road. My heart was pounding in my throat. For the first time in a month, I was approaching the gate of my former home, not as a supplicant, but as an invader. The key slid smoothly into the lock. The gate opened. The yard was covered in snow. Marcus had fired the groundskeeper and wasn't used to picking up a shovel himself. I walked up to the back door. Another turn of the key.
click.
I was inside. The house greeted me with silence and the smell of staleness. Unopened boxes from high-end boutiques were strewn in the hallway. There were wine stains on the living room floor. Dust lay on the shelves where my favorite figurines used to sit. It was clear that transients were living here. People who didn't care about the house. I didn't waste time on sentimentality. I went up to the second floor to what used to be our bedroom. Now it was Tiffany's. Her clothes were scattered everywhere. A mountain of makeup on the vanity. I began to search. I knew Tiffany wasn't very smart, but
She was sly.
people like that hide their secrets close to them. I tore through. The dresser drawers, empty, only lingerie. I checked under the mattress. Nothing. My gaze fell on the walk-in closet. On the top shelf, behind a stack of sweaters, I noticed the edge of a box. I pulled a chair over, reached up, and brought it down. It was a box for winter boots, but there was no footwear inside. It held a pink velvet diary with a small lock and an old flip phone. The lock was cheap, a toy. I pried it open with a nail file, and it snapped off.
I
Opened the diary. Tiffany's handwriting was round, childlike, with flourishes. October 20th. Marcus is an idiot. He bought me a bracelet, but it's a fail. The stones are tiny. Whatever. I'll tolerate it a little longer. As soon as he signs the beach house over to me, I'm out of here. November 15th.
he's
Starting to suspect something about the money. Got to speed things up. I'll tell him about the baby next week.
that
Always works. I flipped through the pages, and my hair stood on end.
it was
A chronicle, not of love, but of a cold, calculated hunt. But the most interesting thing lay at the bottom of the box beneath the diary. A medical file from a private clinic in the city. And the ultrasound results. I unfolded the form. Date of conception August 12th. Gestation period 16 weeks. I froze. August 12th. Marcus was at an upscale resort in Palm Springs in August. Alone. He went there for 3 weeks to treat his nerves and liver. I packed his suitcase myself. I saw him off at the airport. He was out of the country from August 1st to August 25th. The baby was physically impossible to be his. I picked up the second phone. It was turned off, but there was still a charge left. I pressed the power button. The screen lit up. There were only 3 incoming messages, all from one contact listed as boss. I opened the thread. Are you sure he bought the pregnancy story? Yeah, he's happy as a puppy. Sign the
car over to me.
excellent. Stall for time. I need him to get neck deep in debt to the bank. As soon as he co-signs, the new loan disappear. Will bankrupt him. I looked at the sender's number.
I
Knew this number. The whole town knew it. It was the personal number of Dominic Sterling, Marcus Maine. Competitor, the owner of the largest construction holding in the neighboring state. The man who had been trying to squeeze Marcus' company out of the market for years. The full scale of the catastrophe hit me. Tiffany wasn't just a mistress. She was a mole. The pregnancy was a lie, or rather a truth. But from another man. This entire affair was a special operation to destroy my husband's business. Sterling had embedded her to bleed Marcus' resources, ruin him with his family, me and his mother, force him into debt, and set him up for bankruptcy so Sterling could buy the assets for pennies. And she had almost succeeded. I shoved the documents and the phone into my tunic pocket. Downstairs, the front door slammed shut. What the heck is it so cold in here? Tiffany's whiny voice rang out. Did you forget to pay the gas bill? They were back early. I froze in the middle of the bedroom, clutching the evidence that could destroy both of them. My path to the stairs was cut off. I darted to the walk-in closet where there was an inconspicuous door in the wall to the maid's quarters leading to the back
Staircase.
over the years, Marcus had probably forgotten it even existed, and Tiffany certainly didn't know about it. I slipped into the darkness of the narrow passage, silently closing the panel behind me just a second before the handle of the bedroom door turned. Standing in the dusty gloom, pressing the stolen evidence to my chest, I heard every one of their words. Are you paranoid, Marcus? Tiffany's voice was tight with irritation. No one was here. The wind opened the window. I smell her, though, Marcus screamed. The smell of vanilla and those damn sweet rolls. She was here. I crept down the back stairs on my tiptoes, opened the service door with my key, and vanished into the twilight while Marcus, in a fit of rage, tore the furniture apart upstairs. Returning to Elias, I laid the phone and the diary on the table. My hands were shaking. We have to go to the police, I blurted out. Right now, this is fraud. It's conspiracy. I have all the evidence.
To put both of them away.
Elias slowly leafed through the diary, examining the medical chart. Then he took off his glasses and looked at me with his heavy, calm gaze. No, he said firmly. What do
You mean no?
I choked with outrage. They destroyed my life. They're trying to
Destroy you.
If you go to the police now, a long investigation will begin. Elias explained. Marcus lawyers will drag the case out for years. Tiffany will say the diary is just her fantasy for a novel, and the phone was planted.
No, Simone.
Revenge is a dish best served cold. We won't just put him away. We'll destroy his reputation so completely that no one in this town will ever shake his hand again. Wait, he'll make a mistake. He's desperate. And desperation is a bad advisor. Marcus didn't keep us waiting. The mistake happened 2 days later in the morning. A catalog from the city's antiques auction house was delivered to me. On the cover, under the headline Rare Family Heirlooms, was a photograph. My breath caught in my throat.
It was my
Emerald jewelry set, a ring, earrings, and a necklace. My great-grandmother's jewels, which had miraculously survived the revolution. I had kept them in a safe in our house. During the divorce, Marcus claimed the safe was empty, that I had sold or lost them myself. The court believed him, not
me.
now, pressed by debt, he decided to sell the only things that connected me to my lineage. The auction is tonight, I said quietly, clutching the catalog. He wants quick cash. Get dressed, Elias nodded. Put on your best dress. We're going to buy them.
Buy.
I was astonished. My own things. We're going to take back what's ours, the old man smirked. And the auctioneer is an old acquaintance of mine.
He doesn't like thieves.
That evening, I walked into the auction house hall. I wore a long dress of deep emerald green, perfectly fitted to my figure. I was no longer a beaten-down housewife in an apron. I walked with my back straight, leaning on Elias's arm, who looked like a true gentleman in his tuxedo. The hall went silent. Every head
Turned our way.
Marcus, sitting in the front row, flinched as if he'd received an electric shock.
Tiffany sat next to
Him, nervously fiddling with the edge of her coat. She looked nervous. Her eyes darted around the room as if she were looking for someone. I sat down directly across from them. Marcus paused, but then his face twisted into a vicious smirk. He leaned over and whispered something to his lawyer. The bidding began. Small lots went quickly. Finally, the auctioneer, a gay-haired man with a gavel, announced, Lot number 15.
A.
Unique antique jewelry set, gold, Ural emeralds, late 18th century. Craftsmanship. Starting price $500,000. 500,000? I said loudly, without looking at my ex-husband. Marcus flinched.
He
Understood that I wanted the heirloom back, and a greedy spark lit up in his eyes. He decided that since I, or Elias, had money, he would squeeze every last cent out of me. He nodded to his shill, an inconspicuous man in a cap in the back row. 600,000. The man shouted. 700,000. I calmly countered. 800,000, the shill replied immediately. The hall buzzed. The price was inflated, but Marcus was beaming. He was already counting the profit. He thought he had me hooked, playing on my feelings for my grandmother's inheritance. $1 million. The shill shouted at Marcus's signal. Silence hung in the hall. Everyone looked at me. Marcus leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms over his chest. His face seemed to say, "Pay up, darling. Pay me for what I stole from you." I slowly rose from my seat. "I will not raise the bid," I stated loudly and clearly. The smile fell from Marcus's
face.
If I didn't buy it, the lot would go to his shill, who didn't have the money. It would be a failure. He would have to pay the commission to the auction house. But I do have a question for the auctioneer. I continued walking toward the podium. Could you tell me the lot description states that this is the property of Mr. Thorne, an inheritance from his family? Is that correct? Absolutely correct. The auctioneer nodded, looking at me over his glasses. Then why? I turned to the hall.
Is the
inscription to my beloved granddaughter Simone from Grandma Vera, 1998 engraved on the inside of the ring. The hall became so quiet you could hear the projector lamp buzzing. Marcus sprang
up.
She's lying. There's no inscription there. It's mine. Security. Get her out of here. We'll check. The auctioneer said in an icy tone. He put on a jeweler's loupe, picked up the ring from the velvet cushion, and held it to the
light.
A long second passed. Indeed, the auctioneer's voice boomed like a judgment. To my beloved granddaughter, Simone. Mr. Thorne, you provided documents stating this was your mother's inheritance. It appears you lied and put stolen property up for auction.
He
pressed a button under the table. The hall doors locked. It's a mistake. Marcus shrieked, lunging for the exit. I didn't know. She switched it. 2 burly security guards and the police officer on duty in the hall were already walking toward him. Marcus A. Thorne, the officer said matter-of-factly, snapping handcuffs onto my ex-husband's wrists. We'll need you to come with us. For questioning. Attempted sale of grand theft property. Marcus was dragged toward the exit. He kicked and screamed, Tiffany, Tiffany, call the lawyer. Do something, Tiffany. But Tiffany didn't
call.
The moment the handcuffs were placed on Marcus, she stood up, but not to rush to her beloved. She calmly picked up her handbag, adjusted her mink coat, and turned toward the exit. A tall man in an expensive overcoat stood in the doorway. Dominic Sterling, the rival, the boss from the texts, the one she was pregnant by. Tiffany walked up to him. Sterling smiled, offered her his arm, and she, radiating a smile she had never given Marcus, took it. Did you forget anything, darling? Sterling asked loudly, looking directly into the eyes of the raging, handcuffed Marcus.
No, Dominique, Tiffany replied brightly.
There's nothing left here but trash. They turned and walked out of the hall amid the flashes of journalists' cameras, leaving Marcus to stare after them. He stopped struggling. He just hung in the grip of the police officers, watching the mother of his future child walk away, with his bitterest enemy. Finally understanding that his life had just turned to ash, Marcus returned from the police station just before dawn. He was released on his own recognizance while the lawyer he'd promised a triple fee to sort out the formalities of the family misunderstanding. He flew into his house, ready to take out his fury on Tiffany, ready to shake her and demand an explanation. But the house greeted him with silence, a hollow, dead silence. Tiffany, he roared, his voice cracking. "Come out, you tramp." No one answered. He ran up the stairs, stumbling on the steps. The bedroom door was wide open. The closets were empty. Hangers lay scattered on the floor like the skeletons of strange birds. Everything was gone. Her coats, her dresses, her shoes, even the expensive drapes she had ordered from Italy were missing. She had cleaned the place out. The safe, its door hanging from a single hinge, was empty. No cash. No car titles, no jewelry. She had taken everything that could be carried and sold. Marcus collapsed onto the floor in the middle of the ransacked room. He realized he was alone, completely alone, without money, without reputation, without a wife, and without a mistress. And at the center of this collapse stood one figure, Simone. She set this up. She turned the town against him. She stole his luck. Hatred, black and hot, flooded his mind, driving out the fear. He stumbled down to the garage. A red gasoline can for the lawnmower stood in the corner. "You want a war, Simone?" he gasped, unscrewing the cap and sniffing the acrid fuel smell. "You'll get one. I'll burn your rat's nest down along with your old man." He took a massive gulp of vodka straight from the bottle standing on the workbench, grabbed the can, and staggered out onto the street. The freezing air hit his face, but Marcus didn't feel it. Alcohol and madness kept him warm inside. He crossed the road, splashing gasoline onto his expensive boots. Lights were on in the mansion across the street. They were celebrating, drinking tea, laughing at him. Well, it was about to get hot. He walked up to the tall row iron gates of the estate, intending to douse the lock with gasoline and light it. Suddenly, headlights blinded him. A massive black SUV, the tires hissing quietly, rolled up to the curb, cutting off his path of retreat. The doors flew open simultaneously. Two men got out of the car. They weren't police officers. They wore leather jackets and thick gold chains. Marcus froze. The gasoline can fell from his weakened hand. It hit the asphalt with a thud. Gasoline began to spread in a dark puddle over the snow. He recognized them. They were collection agents from the pawn shop, a quasi-criminal outfit, from which he had borrowed a massive amount of cash 6 months ago to impress investors. He had sworn to Simone that he had paid them back with money stolen from her inheritance. But he had lied. He spent that money on diamonds for Tiffany. Marcus, one of the muscle-bound men, a shaved-headed giant, nicknamed Tank, shook his head. "You won't answer your phone. You won't read your texts. And the interest is stacking up. I'll pay everything back." Marcus stammered, backing up until his back hit Elias's fence. "I have a deal tomorrow." "You don't have any deals," the second man said calmly, twirling a baseball bat. "We heard the news. You're bankrupt, Marcus. You got caught stealing grandma's rings. You're dead, and it's hard to get debts from a dead man, so we're taking payment in kind right now. Kidneys are expensive these days." They moved toward him. Marcus whimpered, sliding down the fence into the snow. He knew this was the end. The police wouldn't save him. They simply wouldn't arrive in time. The gate behind his back squeaked open. "Hold it." A calm woman's voice rang out. The thug stopped. Marcus shakily raised his head. Simone walked out of the gates. She was wearing a warm house coat over her dress. She didn't look scared. She looked like she was in command. "Simone, go away," Marcus shrieked. "They'll kill you." Simone stepped over the puddle of gasoline and stood between her ex-husband and the thugs. "Good evening, boys," she said. "Tank, if I'm not mistaken." The giant snorted in surprise. "Who are you, lady? Go bake cookies before you get hurt." "I'm the one who has the money," she simply replied. "Unlike this piece of work lying in the snow." She took out her phone and showed them the screen. "I know how much he owes you. $300,000 plus late fees. $500,000 in total. But you understand that you won't get a penny from him. He's broke. His Accounts are frozen. His house is collateral, and his car is leased. You can beat him. You can kill him, but it won't bring you any money. Only prison time. The thugs exchanged glances.
She
Was speaking their language, the language of profit. So, what's your offer? Tank narrowed his eyes.
I'll buy.
His debt, Simone said firmly. Right now with a transfer to your offshore account, but with a discount. I'll give you $250,000. That's cold, hard cash right here, right now, or you walk away with nothing in a murder rap for killing a bankrupt guy. It was brazen, but it was also the only way for them to recover anything. Tank scratched the back of his neck, looked at the pathetic Marcus, then at the composed Simone. 300,000, he said. 250,000. Simone cut in. And we signed the assignment agreement on the hood of your car now. Tank spat into the snow.
Deal.
You got balls, lady. I respect that. One of the thugs pulled a crumpled assignment agreement form from the glove compartment. Simone read it carefully, illuminating it with her phone's flashlight, and signed it with a flourish. Then she performed a few manipulations in Elias's banking app, which he had given her full access to. Money transferred, she said, showing them the receipt. Tank checked his phone. It's in. See you, Marcus.
Lucky.
You got an ex-wife. The thugs got back into the SUV and drove off, leaving us in the silence of the night street.
It
Smelled of gasoline and stale alcohol. Marcus was still sitting in the snowbank. He looked up at Simone, unable to believe his eyes. He was trembling. You saved me, he whispered.
and
Hope crept into his voice. Simone, you still love me. I knew it. I knew you'd. Forgive me. We'll start over, right? I'll throw Tiffany out. Simone looked at him not with love or even hatred. She looked at him as if he were a smudge on a tablecloth. She waved the paper she had just signed in front of his nose. You don't get it, Marcus.
her voice rang.
With steel. I didn't save.
You.
I bought you. She took a step toward him, and he instinctively pressed himself into the snow. Remember that loan agreement?
She asked.
It says in the fine print about collateral. The security for this loan was all the borrower's property, including the real estate. Marcus' eyes widened in terror. You no longer owe the thugs, she stated, every word clearly articulated. You owe me $500,000 right now. Do you have the money? Marcus shook his head. Then the collateral clause takes effect. Simone pointed across the street to the mansion with the golden lions. As of this second, that house belongs to me in settlement of the debt. She leaned over him so closely that he could see his reflection in her cold eyes. Get up, Marcus, and get out of my house.
You.
Have 10 minutes to take your personal belongings before I change the locks. Time starts now. But Marcus didn't
Leave.
Instead of gathering his belongings, he staggered toward the porch. He tripped, fell to his knees, but immediately scrambled up and yanked the heavy front door open. I heard the door slam shut with a crash, followed by the dry metallic scrape of the locks. One turn, a second, a third. The bolt slid home. It's my house. His hysterical scream came through the door.
Mine. You.
Won't get it. I'm the owner here. My home is my castle. I remained standing at the gate, clutching the contract that was now my only weapon.
Silence reigned.
Around us, broken only by the heavy breathing of Elias, who had walked out onto his porch and stood behind my
Shoulder.
He won't come out, Simone, the old man said quietly.
He's
Cornered, and a cornered rat is more dangerous than a tiger. Just then, a window on the second floor flew open, the same one Tiffany had once laughed out of at me. Marcus's figure appeared in the opening. In the light of the street lamp, I saw the glint of metal, a double-barreled shotgun, the hunting rifle he liked to pose with in pictures, though he'd never been hunting in his life. Get out, he yelled, aiming the barrels down at us. Everyone get out. Anyone who comes near the fence, I'll shoot like a dog. A shot roared. bird's shot sparked off the asphalt 3 feet from my feet. I didn't move, but Elias sharply yanked my arm, pulling me behind the concrete gatepost. "Call the police," he snapped. "This is no longer a family squabble. It's an armed assault." 10 minutes later, our quiet street turned into a war zone. Sirens wailed, making my ears
Ring.
Searchlights sliced through the darkness, illuminating Marcus Mansion like a stage set. Police cars blocked the exits. SWAT officers in helmets and body armor poured out of a van, taking positions behind cars and trees.
Captain.
Miller, the pie lover, was now serious and grim. He stood next to me behind an armored shield holding a megaphone. "Thor," his voice boomed, amplified by the speaker. "Drop the weapon. You are surrounded. Come out with your hands up." In response, a shot was fired from the window again. The glass in a police cruiser shattered. "I won't go back to
Jail."
Marcus shrieked. "You'll take me alive. I'll burn everything down." Neighbors, the same ones who had recently been drinking at his receptions, now huddled in corners, filming the scene on their phones. For them, it was a show, a free circus. "Miss Hollis." The captain turned to me, adjusting his helmet. "We can't wait. He's drunk and irrational. He has a gas can inside.
We saw him bring it in.
If he sets the house on fire, we'll lose. Not only the property, but the neighboring buildings, too. I'm giving the command to storm. The sniper is ready." I felt cold inside. A sniper meant death. Yes, Marcus had destroyed my life. He had thrown me out into the freezing cold. He betrayed me.
He humiliated me.
But I remembered him differently. I remembered us dreaming about our business, how happy he was about the first cake we sold. I didn't want his blood on my hands. If he died here on the threshold of the house I had just taken from him, that shadow would stay with me forever. "No," I said firmly. "Don't shoot. Give me 5 minutes. It's dangerous," the captain warned. "He won't shoot me if I talk to him on the phone.
He has a choice. He
just doesn't see it yet." I pulled out my cell phone. I dialed the number I had known by heart for 15 years. The rings went on forever. I watched the dark window where my ex-husband was hiding and prayed he would pick up. Finally, a click. Heavy, ragged breathing on the
line.
"What do you want?" he croaked. "Do you want to enjoy this?"
Came to watch me. D.
Marcus, listen to me. My voice was calm, even. I didn't scream or beg.
I
spoke like a surgeon explaining a diagnosis. "Look out the window. Do you see the snipers? They will kill you in 2 minutes if I don't stop them." "Let them kill me," he snarled. "I have nothing to
lose.
You took everything." "I only took back what you yourself gave away," I said harshly. "But you need to know the truth before you pull that trigger. You think you're the tragic hero?
No, Marcus.
You're the clown in a farce." "Shut up." "No, you're going to listen."
You're
screaming about Tiffany, about your love. Then know this. She never loved
you.
The child she's carrying. Did you see the medical file? 16 weeks along, and you were out of the country at the moment of conception. That baby is Sterling's Marcus. I finished without mercy. Your enemies.
She was his spy.
You were used as a wallet, and when the money ran out, you were discarded. Are you ready to die for a woman who's laughing at you right now in bed with your competitor? I heard him draw a ragged breath. "That's a lie," he whispered, but the conviction was gone from his voice. "And listen to this about your mother," I continued relentlessly. "How do you think I got inside your house? How did I find out about the safe? Your mother, Marcus, Brenda Thorne, herself gave me the keys because you were stealing her pension. You stole from your own mother to buy a prostitute, a car. You betrayed everyone who loved you. Mom," his voice cracked, turning into a pathetic sob. "You have nothing, Marcus. No honor, no family, no money, no home. You're standing in the middle of the ruins that you created yourself. But you have a chance to stay alive. Come out. Not for me. But so you don't give Sterling the satisfaction of seeing your corpse on the news. I fell silent. Seconds ticked by like lead. I saw the captain raise his hand, ready to give the signal to the sniper. Marcus, put the gun down, I said softly. Come out. It's over. The line went dead. I lowered the phone. My heart was pounding in my throat.
The
captain looked at me questioningly. I shook my head, asking him to wait.
And
then the window closed. A minute later, the lock on the front door clicked. Slowly, creakingly, the heavy oak door opened. Marcus stepped out onto the
porch.
He was coatless in an unbuttoned shirt despite the 0-degree cold. There was no gun in his hands. He held his empty palms up. He looked terrifying. His face was gray, his eyes wide, his mouth half open. He swayed as if the floor were sinking beneath him. The SWAT team lowered their rifles, but didn't come out of cover. Marcus took a step, then another. He walked down the steps of his palace, which no longer belonged to him. He looked straight ahead, but his gaze was unfocused. He looked through the police, through the searchlights, through me. He reached the gate, the very spot where only a month ago he had thrown my gym bag into the snow. The very spot where he had nearly hit me with his car. He stopped directly across from me. His lips moved, trying to pronounce something. Maybe, forgive me, maybe a curse, but no sound came out. Suddenly, a strange, horrifying grimace distorted his face. The right corner of his mouth drooped. His eyelid drooped. He clutched his left hand to his head as if he'd been hit by an invisible hammer. His legs gave way. He collapsed into the snow heavily like a sack of cement right at my feet into the very snowbank where
my
bag had once lain. Medic, I screamed, rushing toward him. The SWAT team and medics rushed up simultaneously. I turned him onto his back. His eyes were open, but filled with a frozen animalistic terror. He looked at me and I could see him trying to say something, trying to move his hand, but his body no longer obeyed him. He was locked inside his own flesh. Stroke, the EMT said curtly, shining a flashlight into his pupils. Massive hemorrhagic. Get him to the ER immediately. It's a race against the clock. He was loaded onto a stretcher. The flashing lights of the ambulance painted the snow a worried
red.
The vehicle roared and sped away, carrying my ex-husband, my enemy. The man who wanted to destroy me, but who had ultimately destroyed himself. I was left standing at the open gate. I was still clutching my phone. The wind fluttered the hem of my coat. Police officers bustled around. Neighbors discussed something, but for me, silence had fallen. The war was over. The enemy had fallen, but there was no triumph. There was only emptiness and the cold snow on which the imprint of his body remained. 3 months flew by like a single breath. The winter which had seemed endless retreated. The snow where I had once sat, crying in despair, melted, giving way to the first bright grass. Spring came to our town, not just as a change of season. It came as a symbol of cleansing. I stood on the wide porch of my former house, the very one from which I had been chased away like a dog. Now there were no golden lions or wrought iron initials of Marcus here. We had torn down the fence that separated the two properties. Now Elias's historic mansion and my former palace were a single complex, a vast space whose doors were open to everyone. Today was the opening day. The entire town gathered on the lawn. The same neighbors who had hidden behind their curtains now stood with bouquets of flowers. The mayor, the architects, ordinary people. Everyone came to see the miracle.
The air
smelled, not of gasoline and smoke, but of vanilla, fresh sweet rolls and blooming apple trees. A modest but stylish sign hung on the facade of the building.
The
Willow Creek Culinary School and Hope Women's Crisis Center. I adjusted the folds of my new dress, the color of young leaves. I no longer felt like a victim. I felt like the foundation upon which this place stood. In the crowd, I looked for familiar faces. Brenda Thorne stood in the front row, holding the hand of her neighbor's small granddaughter. My former mother-in-law had aged, but the fear was gone from her eyes. We hadn't become friends, but I allowed her to live in the guest house and help with the garden. It was my decision not to seek revenge on the weak. Tiffany wasn't here. Yesterday, I stopped by a supermarket on the outskirts for flowers and saw her. She was sitting at the checkout counter without makeup, with dark roots growing out of her hair, in a cheap uniform. She mechanically scanned yogurt and bread, never looking up. Dominic Sterling had dumped her a week after the auction. As soon as he realized she was no longer useful to him as a tool against Marcus, she saw me, recognized me, and I noticed her shoulders hunching, wishing she could disappear into the floor. I didn't approach her. I didn't care. Dear friends, Elias's voice pulled me from my thoughts. The old man stood at the microphone. He looked magnificent. A sharp gray suit, a straight back, his gray hair neatly styled. No one would have recognized the vagrant from the bench in him. For many years, this house was a symbol of greed, he said, and his voice carried over the crowd. People who believed that money solved everything lived here, but they were wrong. 3 months ago, a woman saved my life by giving me the last thing she had, the warmth of her heart. He turned to me and held out his hand. I walked up, holding back tears. Simone not only brought this house back to life, she filled it with meaning.
Now it will teach a trade to
those who have lost faith in themselves. It will shelter those who have nowhere else to go. Elias pulled a document with an official seal from a folder. I am alone, and my time is
short.
Therefore, today I officially announce I have adopted Simone. She is now my legal daughter, my only heir, and the rightful owner of this entire estate. The crowd roared with applause. People shouted, "Bravo!" Some were crying. Elias hugged me tightly, fatherly, and whispered, "You earned every brick in this house, daughter." We cut the red ribbon together. The celebration began. Music, laughter, the clinking of glasses, but I had one last piece of unfinished business. I quietly slipped away from the banquet and walked over to the bench near the gate. That very bench. Now, it wasn't dilapidated and freezing. We had painted it gold and attached a bronze plaque to the backrest. I ran my finger over the raised letters. Kindness is the only currency that matters. I got into my car. My path wasn't leading home. The city nursing home was on the other side of town. It was a bleak brick building. The corridor smelled of bleach and hopelessness. I walked into the private room. The nurses nodded respectfully to me. They knew who was paying the bills. Marcus lay on the bed. The stroke hadn't killed him, but it had done something worse. It had locked him in. Doctors called it locked-in syndrome. He understood everything, heard everything, saw everything, but he couldn't move a hand or a foot. He couldn't speak. He just lay there and stared at the ceiling. His face was sunken, his eyes filled with a frozen, animalistic horror. When I entered, his gaze darted to me. A spark flared in it, a mix of hatred, pleading, and shame. He recognized me. He saw how beautiful I looked, how calm and strong I had become. I walked up to the bed. I didn't sit down. I would never sit at his feet again. I stood over him. "Hello, Marcus," I said softly. His pupils widened. He was probably expecting me to gloat or that I had come to turn off the life support. We opened the center today, I continued. The whole town came, even your mother. Everyone asked about you, but they quickly forgot. You've become the past, Marcus. Dust. I pulled my wallet out of my handbag and took out a single coin.
A simple dollar. Coin.
I placed the coin on the bedside table next to his head. The metallic clink on the glass sounded deafening in the silence of the room. "Do you know why you're here in a private room on Clean sheets and not in the general ward where the indigent die? I asked, looking him straight in the eyes. Because I pay for you every month. Your accounts are gone. Tiffany stole everything. Your house is mine now. You have nothing. You're only alive because I decided it. His eyes filled with tears. Helpless tears ran down his temples into the pillow. I leaned right down to his ear. You don't even have a single nail in this place. You were nothing but the hired help here. Now you're fired. Get out. I whispered his very own words, the ones that had started this nightmare. He squeezed his eyes shut, trying to hide from his past, but he couldn't even cover his ears with his hands. You said I was just the help. My voice became soft almost. Tender but as cold as that winter wind. Now I serve the whole town. I feed hundreds of people. And you, Marcus, you live on my charity. I straightened up and looked at him one last time. There was no anger in that look, only indifference. I forgive you, Marcus, I said. Not because you deserve forgiveness, but because to me, you're nobody now.
An
empty space. I turned and walked toward the door. The clicking of my heels on the tiled floor sounded like the beat of a metronome, counting the start of my new life. I walked out into the street. The sun was dazzling. The wind rustled my hair. I took a deep breath of the sweet spring air. I was free, and, for the first time in years, I was truly happy. I'm really glad you're here, and that I could share my story with you. If you liked it, show me by liking the video and subscribing to my channel. Let's see how many of us
there are.
Write in the comments which city you're watching from and what time it is. I'm so curious to know where all you wonderful people are tuning in from. If you want to support me a little extra, you can also send a small donation. I share new life stories for you every single day.
And now 2 of my
most popular stories will pop up on the screen so you can choose what to watch next.